So I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. This is the offseason that just keeps on giving, because not only do we still have a ton to talk about in the realm of college football recruiting, which we're going to get back to, but today we need to focus on the biggest topic in all of college football, and that's college football expansion. Because on the heels of USC and UCLA's move, there are several other institutions looking to make moves of their own, and today we need to break down what this means and what the future could look like. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, Y for yes, N for no. Are you surprised that the Big 12 is in talks with the likes of Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado? Let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification, as I do constant college football content, and you don't want to miss any of it. But having said all that, let's jump right into this, because while I was on vacation, major news broke, as it always tends to happen when you're on vacation, that USC and UCLA were looking to leave the Pac-12 and join the Big 10. News that did not take long to go from just a simple question to absolutely legitimate. And now, on the heels of that move, we're talking about major institutions such as Utah, Arizona State, Arizona, and Colorado trying to gain entrance to the Big 12. And they're reportedly not alone, because Oregon and Washington are also interested in talks with the Big 12. Now, whether those are just pure talks and it's just a pure interest, or whether or not they're trying to gauge the interest of the Big 12 relative to the Big 10, I'm not 100% certain. But what I do know is it behooves the Big 12 to enter into talks with Oregon, with Washington, and we're going to talk about that a bit later. Because the Big 12 is one of the most intriguing conferences in all of college football right now. Last offseason, it looked like the Big 12 could be in real trouble when their two biggest brands in Texas and Oklahoma decided to bolt for the SEC. Whenever that happened, many people thought that the Big 12 could be over. I was very intrigued to see what their next move would be, because luckily for the Big 12, you still have some very legitimate brands in that league. When we're talking about Baylor with Dave Aranda, one of the best young head coaches in all of college football right now. You have Oklahoma State, who, even though they may not be a powerhouse, they're still a very solid football team. You have Iowa State, who, much the same as Oklahoma State, just a very solid football team. And that just seemed to be the state of the Big 12, where you had no super teams, but you had some solid programs. Then the Big 12 decided to announce that they were going to add 4 teams in UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU. And when that happened, I thought those were 4 great additions. Look, whenever we're talking Cincinnati and UCF, we've been talking about those teams as teams that were on the cusp of something greater, and a lot of people thought their only barrier was being a non-Power 5. Now that barrier is stripped away and they are a Power 5 program, and I personally believe those were 2 huge wins for the Power 5 and especially the Big 12, because I think they're going to add a lot into that conference. On top of that, you have Houston, so you get to add in a major media market in Houston, a great recruiting grounds that, let's be honest, the Big 12 was already in because of the state of Texas, and then you get in BYU from Utah, which I thought was a super great move, because BYU is a team that can ruin anybody's season any given year. They are a really solid program, and if you play them, you better circle that game on your schedule and not sleep through it, because if you do, it's not going to end well. So fast forward a year, and once USC and UCLA announced that they are going to the Big 10, the Pac-12 is in a very similar position as the Big 12 from a year ago. However, I would contend that they don't have as much to stand on as the Big 12 did. And I think that Pac-12 teams realize that as well, because it did not take long for the likes of Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado to enter into talks with the Big 12. And reportedly, Oregon and Washington tried their hand at entering the Big 10, and the Big 10 put them on hold, depending on what Notre Dame did. Oregon and Washington apparently did not like that and instantly went to the Big 12 to gauge their interest, or so it has been reported per 24/7 Sports. I think that the adding in these teams would be a great win for the Big 12. And right now, as Chris pointed out last night in our live stream, the Big 12 has gone from trying to survive to trying to prosper. And I love to see it, because in this day and age, you have got to be progressing. And if you stagnate, that is going to get you in a lot of trouble. Because right now, the Pac-12 could be facing its downfall. if they lose the brands USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Arizona State, Utah, Arizona, and Colorado, it's going to be real hard to come back from that. It doesn't really matter who you add in because other teams are going to look to leave as well. And one thing the Pac-12 has done right now that I'm super interested in hearing from all of you, because it makes sense in the thought of transparency, but it does not make sense in the guise of self-preservation, is the Pac-12 has allowed these teams to negotiate their media contracts early. And essentially what that does is it gives every team currently in the Pac-12, not named USC and UCLA, a look at what type of money they're set to lose because USC and UCLA is leaving. Once they get that understanding, realize that they could make exponentially more money leaving the Pac-12, and then realizing that the Pac-12 is on shaky ground at best, it makes complete sense that we're seeing all these teams bolt for the door. But inevitably, college football realignment is not done, and I personally don't believe it's close to being done. Because if we look at Texas and Oklahoma, they're set to join the SEC in 2025 whenever their contract expires. Many people, including myself, believe we could see that earlier than 2025, but for simplicity's sake, let's consider it is 2025. Between now and then, there are going to be more teams testing the waters of realignment even past this summer. I don't expect the dust to fully settle this summer because the dust didn't settle last summer. I don't think the dust will settle this summer because there are still some major things that need to be decided. Because as the Pac-12 seems to be folding, more teams from the Pac are going to be looking to jump ship as they get a realization of the money they're set to lose. And on top of that, another major barrier is the college football playoff expansion that was sidelined. That's going to be something we have got to keep up with because that was one of the major issues, and now it's just kind of been put off to the side. So college football realignment has had many ripple effects, some of which we're still understanding. But now let's refocus and talk about why I think the Big 12 is making such a great move and trying to add in these teams. Because if we look at the viewership for a team like Utah, they come in at 37th in the nation. Arizona State is 47th in the nation. Colorado is 64th, and Arizona is 67th. And understand, these teams, these locations offer major media markets, but I'm talking about the individual average viewership per game. That's what I'm talking about. I understand that BYU is already in the Big 12, and therefore the Utah market has been satisfied, but now you're compounding it, because not everybody in the Utah market is solely interested in BYU. Some in the Utah market are solely interested in Utah. So whenever I talk about that, that's what I mean. And I think it's a great thing that the Big 12 is getting in both Utah and BYU, adding in a great rivalry. On top of that, whenever you're talking about Arizona State and Arizona, those are major media markets that are only going to continue to grow, something that I think really is great for the Big 12. And even though Colorado may be 64th in average viewership per game, you're still gaining access to the Denver media market, which at the end of the day is a great win. If they're able to add in Oregon and Washington on top of that, well, the Big 12 is going to be in a really interesting position, but it is going to be intriguing to see what Oregon and Washington do. If the Big 10 decide we'd like to have you, would they accept the Big 10 over the Big 12? Tough to say, but proximity-wise, it would make sense. At the end of the day, though, this isn't done. This is far from over. And one of the things I think we need to realize, and one of the things this is exposing, something that's been whispered but never really said on the forefront, is who really runs college football. And it's not the NCAA. It's the major media companies that are passing out all of the money. Your ESPNs, your Fox, and right now, if we look at college football realignment, it basically looks like a war between Fox Sports and ESPN to see who's going to be able to make the most money. And it's going to be interesting to see the moves that are yet to be made. But now that we've talked about all that, hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking about all this craziness. That's it. See ya.